Bueno, muy buenos días a todas las personas que empiezan a unirse a esta sesión informativa del día de hoy, 27 de agosto del 2025. Mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Karen Martínez, soy profesional del área de Consejería Académica y Relaciones Internacionales en Colfuturo. Y el día de hoy estamos con London School of Economics and Political Science, ubicada en el Reino Unido. Estoy muy bien acompañada en esta ocasión con Nathan Brennan. Él es representante de esta institución y nos va a hablar sobre temas relacionados a oferta académica, opciones de financiación, hospedaje y todas las recomendaciones que él desde su experiencia les pueda brindar para orientarlos en esta planeación de su proyecto académico. Quiero recordarle a todos y todas que este es el lugar ideal para que puedan resolver sus inquietudes y preguntas al respecto, así que no duden en dejarnos cualquier inquietud a través del cajón de Q&A, que con muchísimo gusto lo iremos resolviendo a lo largo de la sesión. Adicionalmente, si todavía no tienen total claridad sobre el funcionamiento de nuestro programa Crédito Beca, los invitamos a nuestras charlas informativas al respecto el primer viernes y el segundo sábado de cada mes. Como sabrán, estas sesiones informativas las estamos realizando en el marco de nuestra línea de convenios con las universidades internacionales y para este caso, el London School of Economics ofrece una beca del 100% para un integrante del programa de semillero de talentos de Colfuturo y becas del 20% para todos los demás beneficiarios. Sin duda alguna, son oportunidades increíbles que nos ofrece esta institución y este país, que será muy gratificante aprovecharlas, así que nuevamente la invitación es que puedan preguntarle y dirigir todas sus inquietudes a Nathan, que él con muchísimo gusto ayudará a resolverlas. Entonces, sin mayor preámbulo, Nathan, thank you so much for being here today with us. We are so happy to have you here in this space. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to be speaking English for my presentation today. Estoy aprendiendo español, but not good enough yet to do the full presentation. So I will try and speak nice and clearly. But of course, if you have any questions or if anything doesn't make sense, please feel free, as Karen mentioned, to put a question in the chat in English, in Espanol, and we will do our best towards the end to answer those. So, a very warm welcome to today's session. As mentioned, so my name is Nathan, and I'm based here in the London School of Economics. And I have particular responsibility for working with students who would like to come to LSE from Colombia. So I am a huge fan of Colombia. I have visited many times now, normally to Bogota, but I think it's a wonderful country, and I really enjoy my job because I get to speak to students like you who are thinking about their future and thinking about, where they want life to take them. And it might well be that LSE fits in to that story. So today we'll talk a little bit about masters and PhD programs at LSE. We'll talk a little bit about how they work, why you might want to come to LSE, where that might take you, and most importantly, how you can receive some really generous funding from COLFUTURO in order to fund that journey and that professional development. So by the end of today's session, if you don't know anything about LSE right now, you will know everything you need to know by the end of the hour we have. And I want to start here. So as Karen mentioned, LSE, the clue is in the name. We are based in the UK, in the capital city of London. And I always like to start by talking a little bit about the UK as a country, but particularly as a country to study in, because your experience in the United Kingdom will be, quite different to maybe if you've studied before in Colombia or in the US or in Europe or wherever it may be. And I think, it's fair to say that the UK has one of the best reputations when it comes to our universities, our education system, maybe only second to the US. but no one wants to go to the US anymore, so let's not even bother. The UK is full of amazing universities like LSE um, that have a lot to offer to students. I think one thing to say though about studying in the UK is that how we do things is a little bit is a bit different to other countries. And the main focus really of studying at a UK university is developing you as a student. And so all students at UK universities are active participants in research, right? You will spend a lot of time as a student in the UK working on your own research projects, writing your own papers, right? All those kind of things. Because really, we don't just want to put, you know, information in your head. We want you to develop skills and experiences and expertise. It's not just about, listening to an old professor and repeating what they said. It's about developing your own ideas and your own interests. Outside of the classroom, though, the UK is a really culturally diverse and historic country. And of course, you would be spending a year living in the UK. And I guess some of you on the call may have been on vacation, right? To London or to wherever. And, when you come and visit, you often do the very tourist type things, right? You go and visit the Queen or the King at Buckingham Palace, or you go to Harry Potter World, or you go and look at stolen art in the British Museum. Um, and the UK and in particular London has got such a rich history and culture, and no matter what anyone says, the food is also very good, right? In the UK, not English food, just to be clear, but everyone else's food is amazing in the UK. So it's a very kind of rich culture. And I think one thing that many students also like to do is use their time in the UK to also travel to other parts of Europe. So if it would be your first time living outside of Colombia or traveling in Europe, you can take a train from London to Paris, or you can take a train to Amsterdam, right? Or a short flight to Italy or to Germany. So many students, explore the UK and explore the history and the culture there, but also will travel, right, and use it as an opportunity to see more of the world. But I guess one other thing that is important for many students, particularly postgraduates, is how this might fit in, how your time in the UK might fit into your career plan. And one of the great things about being a student in the UK is that you have a full entitlement to work while you're studying. So the international student visa means you can have a part-time job during the semester. You can actually have a full-time job during Christmas, during the summer, during Easter. So if you want to gain experience and undertake an internship or a placement, you can absolutely do that. And finally, once you graduate from a university like LSE, if you want to stay after graduation, you absolutely can. So the graduate route visa allows you to stay in the UK after you've graduated for at least 2 years right now. So if you see yourself staying in the UK for a bit longer, maybe again developing some work experience, developing your network, you can absolutely do that. So I think these three main things kind of nicely sum up, what it's going to be like to be a student in the UK, the education, the culture, but then also the work opportunities that are attached to that. But zooming in a bit more, of course, being at LSE, we are based in London. And let me say, I mean, London is one of the best cities in the world, right? And I'm allowed to say that. I'm from Manchester. Manchester is horrible compared to London, okay? London is a much nicer city. And I think that, again, even if you visited London before, you know what it's like, you know the history, the culture, the food, blah, blah, blah. But people also don't realize that London really is a city of students. So London has been ranked for something crazy, like 7 years in a row, as the best city in the world to be a student in. And that's because, yes, you have all the fun stuff happening and the food and whatever, but it's also because there are about 40 different universities in London. That means there are 600,000 students in London. So you are entering into this huge world of students, of study, of learning. But it also means there are lots of bars only for students. There are events only for students. There are discounts everywhere for students. So it's not just a great place to live and to work, but also to study. Now, one problem you might have, though, is because, if you like the idea of coming to London and you like the idea of coming to the UK, you do have a big problem. And if you come, right, you are going to learn what you can see on screen, which is the tube map. But I wanted to share this map to show you what I mean by how you've got a problem, right? Because even if you know for sure that you want to come to London, that still means there are 40 universities to choose from. And every single university on screen is within maybe 1 mile, 2 miles of LSE. There's like 20, right in the center of London. And each of these universities is a bit different. So some universities will be very small, some will be very big, some will be full of Colombian students, some will have no Colombian students. And so the reason this is a problem, right, is because how do you decide? How do you decide which university is right for you, which course is right for you? Because there is so much choice. So what I want to do in this presentation, at least for the next few minutes, is just explain how LSE is different to all of these other universities. And look, I know that every university around the world has someone like me who will spend all of their day saying, oh, we are so special, we are so unique. But LSE actually is. And the reason LSE is so special is because we are the only university in the UK and one of very few universities in the world that is dedicated to the social sciences. The way I like to think about this, right, is that there are a million universities where you could go to study economics, right, or to study politics, or to study law. But there's only one university, at least in the UK, where every single person around you is interested in the same stuff as you. And everyone at LSE is interested in fundamentally, how does our society work, right? That is what we're about at LSE. How does society work? And 9 times out of 10, when someone has that interest of wanting to understand how society works, they have it because they want to make society better. And so LSE is full of students who care about our world. They are interested in understanding it and improving it, right? That's really where we come from, is that desire for reform and improvement. And just to say, I mean, because, many of you might be familiar with LSE for obviously the economics or finance or accounting, right? Those more numbery type subjects. But the social sciences touch so many different areas of our lives, and there are so many things we do at LSE that might inform, your choice of what to study or your research interests. And so just to talk through all the things we do, I've put on screen some examples of some research from our academics, right? So the people who would be teaching you every single week. And so just to pick out a few examples, at the bottom right of the screen, you'll see someone called Nicholas Stern. Now, Nicholas Stern is really, really important. And I think that some of you will already know who he is. But my bet to you today is that in 50 years' time, everyone will know who Nicholas Stern was. And the reason is Nicholas Stern was the first person in history, anywhere in the world, in any country, in any point in time, to write a report. And this was in 2004, 2003. And he wrote a report about how climate change was about to remake the world economy and what that was going to mean for people's consumption habits and the jobs they had, right? And travel and all of these areas. And so, you can come to LSE to study climate change and sustainability from that social and economic point of view. But then you also have someone like Paul Dolan in the middle of the screen, and he's head of our psychology department. And he's an expert on happiness, right? And particularly how we create societies where people feel happy, in that they feel they have value, they have meaning, they have purpose, right? So these are just a few examples of that. Yes, you can come to LSE and study macroeconomics, but you can also study policy, you can study psychology, you can study environment, sustainability, anthropology, social philosophy, history, international relations, right? Because you need all of these perspectives to truly understand, right, how society works. Now, one other thing that makes us different to most other universities is our size. LSE is quite a small university. So in total, we only have 12,000 students. And that might sound like a lot, but when you compare us to other London universities, it's really small. So, for example, King's College London is 45,000 students, and UCL is 55,000 students. So we're not only more specialised, we're smaller, and we're just based in one location. So we have one campus right in the middle of London. So it's a smaller community, right? You in the same place every day, you meet people, you recognize them, and you will get to know like pretty much everyone on your course. And also, interestingly, to note is that the majority of our students are postgraduates at LSE. So we have more masters and PhD students at LSE than we have undergraduate bachelor's students. So we're a bit of an older community. If you're coming to LSE and you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50, you don't need to worry, right? There'll be other people around you with the same interests, of similar age, of similar backgrounds. One thing I do want to just mention at this stage, though, is where those students come from. And if you have the chance to visit LSE, one of the first things you see right in the middle of campus is this globe. And I love this, right? This is where everyone goes to get their new LinkedIn photo, right? On the first day or the Instagram story or whatever, right? They go to the globe. And I love this for two reasons, at least two reasons. The first is that this globe is meant to celebrate that LSE is the most internationally diverse university of any UK university. So in fact, 80%, 80%, right, of our students for masters and PhD come from outside of the UK. So there are more students like you at LSE, i.e., you didn't grow up in the UK, than there are like me being from Manchester, right? Which is pretty amazing in terms of the people you meet, the languages you hear, but also the points of view, right, in the classroom. It's genuinely so diverse. But the second reason I love this, right, is because, you know, we are so used to seeing the map of the world with the USA at the center, or with the UK at the center, or with Europe at the center, right? And the whole point of this globe being on its side is asking, well, what does the world look like from a different point of view? If you're not from those places, with those ideas, with those histories, how does the world look different to you? And really, this is the best way I can summarize what we want to do with LSE, which is, for us, having international students isn't about ticking a box to say, great, 10 Colombians this year, 20 Ghanaians, 30 Germans, right? We want you to bring your ideas, your histories, your opinions, your experiences with you, right? And as lame as it sounds, LSE really is a kind of mini United Nations of people from all around the world who come, right, to talk about the most pressing challenges and problems in our society and bringing all of their voices together. I won't labor the point too much on this, but on screen you can see, some of the numbers I mentioned there. But the thing I will say very quickly is that although we are small, um, we really punch above our weight, if you know that expression, when it comes to producing world leaders. Because genuinely, what happens is people come from around the world to LSE to learn how society works, or how politics works, or how diplomacy works. And they quite often take that knowledge back with them to their home countries and really make a positive impact, both in their own lives, but in the lives of the people and the country around them. So I don't, need to introduce Juan Manuel Santos at the bottom left, which again, no matter what you think of him as president, everyone can agree he did a lot. But also people like Ursula von der Leyen, Kwame Nkrumah, that is the president of Barbados, that is the president of Finland, the current president of Taiwan is an LSE alumni. Even John F. Kennedy, right, came to LSE. So hopefully you get my point, right? That people really do come from around the world, take what they've learned back with them, and many of them do some really impressive things, particularly in politics and governance. And in particular, at this point, look, if you were hoping to come to LSE to get away from Colombian people, I'm sorry, we have a huge community of Colombians at LSE, so you would not be the only person coming. In fact, LSE has more students from Colombia than any other university. Even though we're smaller, right, we have a larger Colombian student body than any other UK university. So you would be coming with others, perhaps from the same university you studied at, or the same background, or the same sector. And many of our Colombian students will come together in our own Columbia Society, which exists to bring students together, right? Give that familiarity of home, that reminder of home, and also promote kind of Colombian culture, Colombian history, right, like around the university. That then extends right to the fact we have world-leading researchers and academics working on Colombian policy issues, Colombian history, all these areas. And once you graduate, you could join our alumni network in Colombia, which is full of top lawyers, politicians, government officials, journalists, right, who all studied at LSE and are now back in Colombia. So that network exists not just here in London, while you're with us, but also once you've finished at LSE. And look, the reason we have so many amazing students from Colombia is COLFUTURO. And, I am very lucky in that I get to travel all around the world to my job. And I've met people in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in South America, in North America. This is, without a doubt, the best scholarship loan package anywhere in the world. I am so jealous, right, that you have this available to you. We have nothing like this in the UK. So, as Karen introduced, COLFUTURO is an organization that will help you fund a master's or a PhD program overseas. You will be provided or can apply for up to 50,000 US dollars. And then depending on certain requirements, that can be turned from a loan into a scholarship. So up to 80% of it can be converted. Now, on top of that, LSE will also provide a fee discount to you. So you will pay 20% less fees at LSE. And we also have two fully funded scholarships for Semilleros students to come to LSE, where all of your fees would be paid for and your living costs, everything would be paid for Semilleros students. So this is an amazing package and you're so lucky to have this. So I'm glad you're here and are taking advantage of this opportunity, because actually LSE was the very first university to sign an agreement with COLFUTURO. So since 1990s, we have been receiving amazing students from Colombia thanks to COLFUTURO. So it's a fantastic program and we can talk more about it. One thing I'd recommend is, if you haven't seen this already, on the COLFUTURO website, there is a really great directory of all the previous students who come to LSE, but also all the other universities. And this is just really interesting to look at. You know, if you're trying to think about what you might like to study or see what other people have done before you, have a look at this directory, right? And you can see where people studied, what they studied at LSE, if they were accepted, if they came. So this is just really interesting to see how many people have come and maybe give you some ideas of what you might like to study. Final thing, and then we'll talk about the more complicated stuff, is about the graduate outcomes. So, you know, what happens after you finish at LSE? And, you know, hopefully you agree with me that education is an investment, right? And when I use that word investment, you know, yes, I mean money, but it's also more importantly, it's your time. You know, if you come to LSE to do a master's, that is 1 year of your life that you are not giving up, right? But for a year, you are saying, I'm not going to work, right? I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to study for a year. And so, you know, it's a big investment into your future and who you would like to be in the future and the things you would like to do. And so I think you're perfectly entitled to ask, well, if I'm making this big investment, what's on the other side? You know, what's the return on my investment? And so to help talk about this, I've put on the screen, this is an extract. I'll move my head over so I can see this myself. This is an extract from this year's Complete University Guide, and this ranks UK universities by graduate prospects. So, how quickly people find jobs, the average starting salary, and the quality of those jobs. And now you can see that by this year's rankings, and I love saying this, okay, I hope I'm not recorded, LSE ranks higher than Oxford and Cambridge on those measures, i.e., LSE graduates on average get better jobs for more money more quickly than Oxford and Cambridge graduates. And in fact, the only reason there is a university higher than us is because Imperial College, London, is all medicine and engineering, right? And if you're a medic or an engineer, very easy to find a job. So let's say LSE is ranked number one in the UK, right, in terms of what people do with their career after leaving us. And as I mentioned before, you know, if you wanted to continue that career in the UK, the graduate route visa would allow you to do that. So our careers service can help you with all kinds of things, meeting employers, finding jobs, finding internships, but they also offer one-to-one careers support as well. We find that about 25% of our graduates work in money jobs. So banking, finance, accountancy, those kind of things. But then the other 75%, the majority, go all over the place. So we have huge numbers of students who work in government, in the civil service, in international organizations like the UN or the EU or the World Health Organization. We produce a lot of journalists. We produce lots of people who work in the charity sector, entrepreneurs, all kinds of jobs, right? And I think that is one thing that I would really emphasize in this session is that what you study, you know, in university, certainly in the UK, doesn't define your career, right? So even if you come to LSE and studied a master's in history, that doesn't stop you from pursuing careers in other sectors, right? You can go and work. I studied history at LSE, and I have friends who now work in big investment banks, right? So I think actually it's more to do with the name of where you study, the reputation, those kind of things. Now I'm going to stop blabbing on about the university for a second and have some tea. Of course, I've got my cup of tea. And we'll spend the last 20 minutes before we take questions, giving you a bit more detail, I suppose, right, on what programs we offer, and crucially, how to apply, because I can see we've already got some questions in the chat. Now, being a specialist university, there are quite a few specialist areas of study that we cover at LSE, right? Obviously, you can come for economics and finance or whatever, but being, the UK's only specialist university, we have some quite unique departments. So at LSE, we have almost 30 teaching departments. So if you were to come to LSE for a master's or PhD, it would be in one of these departments you're looking at now. And as I say, being specialized, we have some, areas that are relatively unique. Things like economic history, things like behavioral science, things like health policy, right? And so across these 30 departments, there are almost 200 degree programs that you can apply to. So I'm not going to obviously go through all 200 degree programs, but I will just give you a few points about, how these work and what to expect. So if you come to LSE for a taught masters, there are all kinds of strange naming conventions that we use in the UK. So things can be a Masters of Science, Masters of Art, Masters of Law, Public Administration, Public Policy. There's various things, right? So the names differ, but pretty much all of our master's degrees at LSE are just 1 year long. So 95% of our degrees will just last 1 year. That will either be 9 or 12 months in total, okay? Now, of course, depending on what you study, the teaching is going to look quite different, right? So if you're studying maths, your classes and your lectures will be very different to a student studying sociology. But pretty much all of our master's degrees will combine lectures with small class discussions. So most of the action happens at LSE in kind of classroom debates, right? So it might be at the start of the week, you have a 1 hour lecture with a really famous, notable professor, and then you go away and do some reading, do some preparation, and then you come to class, and the classes are normally only sort of 10 to 15 students. And the whole idea is you debate and you talk, right? And the students we like most are the people who come to class and they say, Professor, you're wrong. Okay. And here's the reason you're wrong. Here's what I think, or here's how I would change what, you said. But then on top of the classes and lectures, depending on what you study, there will also be additional components to how your degree works. So a really good example would be in the School of Public Policy, because we're teaching you how to make government policy, you have to do what's called a capstone project. And the capstone project is where you are paired up with a government agency. And that could be UK government, it could be French government, German, or even, the United Nations, the EU. And you'll set a policy problem. And you have to work with that government agency to actually design a policy solution to a real world issue. Simultaneously, if you study management, then you will have to do a project with a business or with an organization on a management related issue. So it's a real mixture of the more traditional academic with more hands-on kind of skill-based learning, workshops, capstone projects, those kinds of things. After the masters, if you're interested in coming to LSE for a PhD, it is obviously a much longer program, and our PhDs are normally between 3 and 6 years, okay, depending on what you want to study. So it's a big investment, but I guess the exciting thing about doing a PhD is that at the end of your project, you'll publish a thesis, normally 100,000 words long. And, because of all the research you've done and all the work you've put in, you are probably the world leading expert on whatever you've been researching. And because the PhD at LSE is so rigorous and our students are so good, many of our PhD graduates, will stay at LSE, teaching, doing research, learning assistance, learning support, those kind of areas. But also with a PhD, we have lots of students who go outside of universities. And so just to give you an example very quickly, For our PhD in economics, the number one place that our PhD economics students go after they finish is not universities, it's actually the World Bank. So majority of, the biggest proportion of LSE PhD economics students, when they graduate, actually go to the World Bank and, work on policy, work on research, those kind of things. So you can have academic or more professional, non-academic careers as well. Now, my advice would be, so like I say, there are 200 programs at LSE and there's lots of combinations and differences. So if you're starting your research, my advice would be Google LSE master's degrees, right? Or LSE PhD degrees. And when you open the LSE website, you'll see a search box at the top of your screen that looks like this. My advice would be search by topics that you are interested in, okay? So don't go through them all or just look at all the ones in economics or all the ones in finance, right? Search by topics you're interested in. And so as an example, if you're interested in development studies, okay, so I searched this for development, you can see there are almost 100 degree programs at LSE that cover some area of development. And this is a really good example because it shows you how we work at LSE, which is that normally there is one general master's degree for every subject, okay? So you can just do a master's in development studies, or you can just do a master's in economics or master's in philosophy, right? But then we also will have more specialized versions of each master's program as well. So as an example, if you're interested in development from a health perspective, we have a master's for that. If you're interested in development of an economic policy, we have one for that. If you're interested in geographic perspectives on development, we have one for that. And so when you're doing your research, you can decide, whether you would like to do a more general program, or if you already have a really specialist interest, we might well have a program for that too. And then you can click into these and read lots more about the different degrees and what the course covers. One thing to mention now, when you apply to LSE, you can apply for 2 degrees at the same time, okay? So when you're doing your research and making your list, keep in mind that you will get a first choice and a second choice program. So it might be that you apply for one general master's and then also one, more specialist masters, okay? So keep that in mind, okay? You can apply for 2 at a time. Now, hopefully at this point, there is at least one person still interested in LSE. If not, I'm doing a really bad job. So let's spend the last 5-10 minutes talking about the hard part, which is how to get in. LSE is a difficult university to get into. We receive lots of amazing applications each year. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about how the process works and give you some advice on how to approach the application, because we look for quite different things to other countries, particularly, if you're applying to colleges in the USA, we look for very different things to what colleges in the US look for. So let's keep that in mind and talk through the process. So if you'd like to apply to LSE for a master's or a PhD, the application is all done online. So you just type in LSE graduate application. The application will always open in October, okay? So normally in the first week of October. To apply, there is a fee, which is currently £95. If that fee is going to cause problems, okay, it is possible to ask to have that fee waived, okay? Because we appreciate with currency and conversion and those things, right, that fee might be more difficult for some people than others. So if that's going to be difficult, ask for it to be waived. But as I say, that application that you submit means you can be considered for 2 degree programs in the same time. So that could be 2 master's degrees, it could be 2 PhDs, or it could even be 1 master's and 1 PhD. It is up to you. One thing to say, of course, is that then there is a separate application for COLFUTURO. And COLFUTURO's applications will always open in January. I'm not going to speak too much about the COLFUTURO application because there are much better people including Karen, who can talk about their application. But the point I wanted to make is that it is up to you if you apply to LSE first or if you apply to COLFUTURO first, okay? You don't need to have a place at LSE confirmed to apply to COLFUTURO. Now, it can help your chances for COLFUTURO, right? So if you send your application for COLFUTURO funding and you have a place confirmed at LSE, that might help your chances. But it's not a strict requirement, right? Because we get some students who apply to us first and then COLFUTURO or the other way around. It's kind of up to you, all right, how you approach. Now, for the LSE application, we need a few things from you. So we need to know, what kind of student you are. So we need your transcript from your bachelor's degree. So with all your class grades and your final marks, we need you to write something called a statement of academic purpose, which is a motivational letter. That's really important. So I'm going to come back to that. We then want to know a little bit more about, your wider life. So we'd ask you to write a CV or a resume, normally just 1 or 2 pages, to show us your job history and your work experience. You then also need 2 references to support your application. Now, as it says on the screen, we prefer academic references. And the reason is, you are coming to LSE to be a student, right? You're not coming for a job, you're coming to study. So the best people who can support your application are people who know you as a student, okay? So if you have professors or people you've done research with or teachers, see if you can get them to write your reference. That said, look, if you left university 10 years ago, all of your professors are probably dead, right? So it's not that was a joke. It's not a strict requirement. If you want to swap your academic references for professional ones, you can, but just try to get at least 1 academic, okay? It will really help you. It is to your benefit to get academic references. On top of that, so some of our degree programs will also need a test result. So this is normally GRE or GMAT. This is only certain degrees. The more kind of corporate MBA type degrees, economics, finance, management, those kind of things need GRE or GMAT, but most degrees don't. So don't double check that when you are researching. And finally, if you're a PhD student, we obviously need to know what you want to research during your time at LSE. So probably the most important thing for you is a research proposal in which you describe to us what you want to research, how you're going to do it, and why you think this is important. This is the most important set of bullet points. There is no deadline for master's applications, okay? So they will open in October, and I don't know when they'll close. We actually have some master's programs for this year that are still open today in August, okay? But many programs will close earlier than that. So my recommendation would be try to apply before January, right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. So one, we work on rolling admissions, which means that we close each degree 1 by 1 by 1 by 1 when it is full, okay? So if you apply before January, all of our degree programs will still be open, okay? I guarantee it will all be still open. But also, it can take about 8 weeks to hear back from LSE. So 8 weeks, 2 months is normal, okay, to get a decision on your application. So you have to kind of think, 8 weeks ahead. And if you apply in January, that means hopefully you have your decision by March. And that's really useful because that still gives you lots of time to apply for other things, okay? So for example, if you want to also apply for LSE scholarships as well as COLFUTURO scholarships, there is a deadline for that in April, right? But also if you want to book LSE accommodation, so to live in LSE dormitories, okay, you have to apply relatively early. You want to have time for your visa. So my point being, you can apply when you want, but the sooner you apply, the better. Okay, you will make life much easier for yourself. So try to apply October, November, December into January. Okay, would be my advice. Of course, all of our degrees will have certain entry requirements. And so on the website, we talk about what grades you need to have in terms of the UK system. Um, if you haven't seen the UK grading system before, do not try to understand it now. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's very old-fashioned. It's very strange, okay? So what I've done instead is put on screen what you would need if you graduated from a Colombian university. Okay, so you can see that for our master's programs, we are normally looking for students with a licenciado, um, with 3.8, okay, is the kind of rough area. And then normally for PhD, we also will ask for you to have a master's degree before applying. As I mentioned, some programs will also ask for GRE GMAT. And the final bullet point on there is also really important, which is, if you are coming to the UK, we have a requirement, as does the government, to check your English language ability. So, we accept IELTS, TOEFL, Cambridge, all kind of different tests. But here's the really important thing. You do not need your English test when you apply. We don't make any decisions based on the English tests, okay? So if you already have an IELTS test at the right level, please send it to us when you apply. But if you don't have it yet, don't worry. My advice would actually be, don't worry about it now. Focus on the application now. Send in a really, really good application. And then use the time you have, again, for applying early, to practice your English and sit a test if you need it, okay? As long as you have an English test result before you start your degree in September of next year, you're fine, okay? So don't worry about the English too much now. Now, I'm going to skip past some of this just because time's against us, and I just want to end on this, which is it's really important to say that grades are not the only thing we care about. We are not, you don't need to be the perfect student to come to LSE. I've met students who we've rejected who have flawless GPA, right? And I've met students who we've accepted with 3.5 or 3.6, right? Which is even a little bit below what we ask for. And the reason is we think the grades are just one part of the picture. We look at the whole person when you are applying, and we'll consider your grades, we'll consider your test scores, if you have them, your references, your CV, everything as a package. And probably the most important thing in the application is the statement of academic purpose. Okay, we don't really have time to get into this now, but what I can say is that we are planning to run an event very soon, in which we talk about how to write the statement of academic purpose, because this is actually the number one thing that students from Columbia get wrong, because we're looking for quite special things and certain things. So we won't talk about this too much now, other than to say this is really important part of the application. It's probably the thing we use to decide most cases. And so what I would really recommend is in a minute, I'm going to share a link. In fact, let me do that now. Here we go. If you scan the QR code on screen, you'll receive an email from us with lots more information about the application process, the scholarships, and the statement of academic purpose. But the reason this is going to be helpful is if you let us know that you are in Colombia, when you scan this QR code, you will then receive an invitation to the event we do about admissions and about writing the statement of academic purpose. And you will also get a link to book a one-to-one appointment with me. So if you still have questions from this event, scan the QR code and we'll send you a link of how you can book a Zoom appointment to speak with me. So we really want to support you. We know that there are amazing students on this call today. And so we're happy to help, right? To help you make sure that your application is as strong as it could be. So scan the QR code and we will be in touch and we can help you out with that. And finally, other than that, I just want to flag that we will be visiting Colombia later this year. So in the middle of October. And we haven't announced the dates yet, but we will be hosting an open house in Bogota with COLFUTURO. So if you want to come and meet me in person and talk about your application in person, it would be great to see you there. So save the dates. LSE will be in Bogota. Come and say hello. And like I say, if you scan this, we'll let you know about those events and about how you can come and speak to us. So I'll leave that QR code on screen for a minute. I'll end just by saying thank you so much again for taking the time to be here and listening to me for 45 minutes. We don't take it for granted. We know that you're busy. We know that you have lots of options. So it's really great to have so many of you here today. And I hope it's been useful and that we can keep in touch if you have questions. So Karen, I will shut up now and maybe we could have a look at the questions.
Yes. Thank you, Nathan, for this amazing presentation and information. So yes, we have some questions for you. The first question is, what is the minimum undergraduate GPA required for admission? And what would be considered an ideal GPA to be a competitive candidate?
Yes, so that goes back to that entry requirement slide. So sort of 3.8, we would consider a really strong grade. If you have more than that, great. If you have a little bit less than that, it's still possible. If you're very close and have really other strong parts of the application. But yeah, 3.8 out of 5 if is normal. Yeah.
Perfect. And complementary to that, what things, activities, jobs can I do in order to strengthen my profile and significantly increase my change of being?
So you want the secret code you have to say to get in. So this is a really hard question to answer because everyone on this call will be in a slightly different situation, right? I'm sure there'll be some people on this call today who are still in university and you're going to classes and your lectures, but there'll also be other people, right, who left university 10 years ago, right? And you're a working professional. And the advice I'd give to each person is going to be a bit different. I think the number one thing that I can recommend for strengthening your application relates to the statement of academic purpose again, which is that when people write the statement of academic purpose, the number one mistake we see is people being very vague or being very general about why they want to come to LSE. And people say, oh, I really like economics and I want to come and learn about economics and do my masters and blah blah blah. And what we would say to those people is, okay, but there are a million different masters in economics degrees out there. Why this one? And so actually the number one way you can stand out is to research the program in detail and talk about everything that you would learn at LSE in your application. So if you go on the master's web pages, you can see exactly the classes you take, the professors who teach them, the things you read, the things you study. And so I would recommend trying to talk about all of those things in your application. So if you can see that you have to do macroeconomics, you can say, well, I've done this course, my bachelor's in macroeconomics, and I got this really good grade and read this and done this. So I guess, again, my advice would be different depending on people's life situation. But one piece of advice that I think is really useful, and I know it's basic, but basically is do your research and really try and cover all of those areas in the application.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, the next question is, if I complete my undergraduate degree in economics and international business in Colombia, is it mandatory to submit the GMAT for the master degree in economics and management and the master in management and strategy?
Yeah, we so when you look at the LSE degrees, it will say really clearly at the top if GMAT is required, if GRE is required, or if either of them are recommended. Now, in most cases, if you've not studied in the UK, if you're undergraduate, you'll probably have to do a GRE or GMAT, particularly for the degrees you mentioned there. So management normally asks for GRE, GMAT. Economics normally does. So I think the chances are yes, you will have to do it. It's a strict requirement. So that can also help with your thinking, right? Because if you see that one degree requires it, and it's excuse my language, but it's a pain in the arse to do GRE, GMAT. It takes a long time. You're busy, it can be expensive. So if you see another degree which is very similar but doesn't ask for GRE or GMAT, you might want to consider applying to that either as well or instead of. So yeah, again, you have to check the web pages. I think it's likely if you want to do management or economics. But there are often some similar degrees at LSE that maybe are a bit more flexible.
Mhm. Perfect, thank you, Nathan. Okay, David say, I applied to MPP in 2024 and I received a conditional offer
Mm.
because of the English requirement. I requested a deferral to study in 2025. However, I couldn't travel this year. Can I play again?
Okay, um, so normally um, we don't allow deferrals unless there is a really, 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 really good reason. So if you get sick or a family member gets sick or COVID, right, or something like that, we normally don't allow people to defer. What we do allow is people to reinstate their application. So what that means, the only difference is that it's not a guaranteed place for next year, but we will assess you again next year, right at the start of the cycle. So we carry everything over and we'd look at your application again. Um, I'll say that having spoken to our graduate selectors, if you were successful this year, David, there is a 95% chance that you'll be successful again next year, even if you don't change a thing in the application. So and you can, if you want to, you can improve things and add things and change things, right? So I would say if you're waiting on English results, request to reinstate for next year. But what I'd also recommend is if you have got an offer this year, congratulations, I should have said, first of all. But please feel free to get in touch with me if you wanted to talk any of this through, and I can help you speak to the right people about this. The English language stuff, it's not uncommon for that to be an issue for people, so we can talk about it if it be helpful.
Carolina asks, are capstones projects an option in all masters?
So they're only required in some programs and departments where it makes sense, right? So you do one in the School of Public Policy, you do one in management, but then it wouldn't make sense, right, to have a capstone project in philosophy because I don't know what that would be. They're normally more career related. So there'll be some programs with these things built in. But whatever happens, like I said before, if you're interested in taking your learning into more of the real world, most of our students undertake research or undertake internships or work placements or those things while they're studying. And we also have a consultancy project as well. So we have a consultancy project where we pair students up with charities in the UK to work on issues that they're facing. So what I'm trying to say is even if it's not part of your degree, because it wouldn't make sense, there's still lots of opportunities for things like that, while you're at LSE.
Okay, next. Okay, could you please clarify the admission requirement for the Master of Science in Economics and Development Economics? Specifically, what English test scores are recommended and whether TOEFL or IELTS is preferable, and whether a GMAT score is required and what would be competitive, and if prior professional experience is necessary, or if students can apply directly after their undergraduate degree.
Shail, that you're cheating. That's about 10 questions in in one. Okay, so I'm going to put in the chat, and this is for everyone, a link to our English language requirements. Okay, so our English language requirements are set across the entire university. So if you click the link in the chat, you can see what IELTS score we need, what TOEFL score we need, those kind of things. And then what I'm going to do really quickly is just share my screen to show you. And this is for a different program, but it's just one that I already have open, if I can find it. I'm doing this quickly. So just to show you, because so I'm not going to go through the very specific requirements for every program, right? Because we'd be here until Christmas. But I just want to show you quickly. So if you look at an example of a program, so this is management and strategy, all the information you need, right, is right at the top under entry requirements. So you can see, for example, this program does require GMAT, GRE. It tells you exactly what you needed to have studied before, and also the grade requirements. So a little bit of homework for everyone to do. You'll have to go away and research. Each program is a little bit different, but the English requirements are normally the same across everything. And normally, most of our degrees will ask for the same undergraduate GPA, so that 3.8 that we mentioned before.
Perfect. Okay. Nicolas says, as you may know, in these times, and some foreigners are an issue in the UK. Even a more liberal government is passing through political constraints based on that. So you think could be possible to develop a career in finance there?
Really interesting question. And I'm always really interested to hear actually about, I guess, what stories travel and what people hear, about the UK in the media and in the news. And look, I think that there are debates in the UK about immigration and how many people, are allowed to travel to the UK, whether it's for work, whether it's for study. But here's the thing. The really sad thing is right now is that pretty much every country on earth is having the same conversation. And if you compare the conversation in the UK to the USA or even to Australia or Canada, actually, the government in the UK and society in the UK is far more open to immigration and particularly to students, I think, than any other country. So, as an example, right, we still have one of the best post-graduation visas of any country in the world, right? So we say that, look, if you graduate, you can stay here for 2 years after you finish. And in those 2 years, you will have the same employment rights as if you were born here. And so I know lots of people, right, who have come and have made use of that visa. And many of them, at the end of those 2 years, have stayed in other ways, right? Because their employers have sponsored them, etc. So I think it's an interesting question. I think we live in a fairly depressing time when it comes to questions about immigration. But look, London is one of the most diverse cities on the planet. We still have some of the best options for students anywhere. And crucially, we don't have Trump.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. If I apply to LSE October 2025, can I go to LSE in academic period that starts in 2027?
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that? My mic cut out just for a sec.
Yes. If I apply to LSE in October 2025, can I
Yeah.
go to LSE in the period that starts in 2027?
Okay, I see. So, no, so you can only apply 1 year before. So if you apply in October of 2025, you would start at LSE in September 2026. Okay, so you can only apply for that kind of 1 year. So if you wanted to start at LSE in 2027, you would need to wait to apply to October 2026. I'm getting confusing myself, but yes, you would apply in October 2026 to start in
Okay,
2027.
yes. 1 year. Yeah, perfect. Okay, I am interested in the Master of Science in Law and Finance, but I'm concerned about the cost of living in London. How
Mm.
does LSE help with us with this?
Yeah, really good question. So I think, London does have a reputation for being an expensive city. And look, it's more expensive than many cities in South America. Um, but here's the thing: London as a city has got more students pretty much than anywhere else in the world, and there's actually lots of things for students that make life way, way more affordable. So living as a student in London is by far the cheapest way to live in London. And just to give you some examples, right? So we obviously have scholarships, bursaries, financial support packages, both in partnership with COLFUTURO, but also at LSE. So if it is possible to apply for COLFUTURO and also get some extra funding from LSE, okay, that is possible. But on top of that, everywhere in London has student discounts or the accommodation is cheaper. You don't pay tax, right, on your living. All of these things, you get free healthcare basically, right, through the NHS. But also, I think I mentioned before is that most of our students have part-time jobs while they're studying. And like I said, so you're allowed to have a part-time job while you're studying for up to 20 hours per week. And because London is a bit more expensive, the part-time jobs have higher salaries, right, than other places. So to give you an example, we have jobs in LSE in our team where people, make social media content or they campus tours, these things, and those students are paid almost £20 an hour. So if you imagine, even if you just did 10 hours part-time work every week for £20 an hour, that is what, £800 a month or like 1,000 US dollars per month, right? Just from that tiny part-time job. So obviously we have support. There are things around the city that are a bit cheaper for you. But on top of that, I would say also have a think about part-time work opportunities and other ways that can give you a bit more money, either to help pay for bills or just to give you some money, right? That means you can go and enjoy the pub or go for a nice meal, right? And have a bit more money in your pocket.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, for the PhD in psychological and behavioral science and in general in the PhD programs, should I have already to have a clear research proposal and a potential advisor?
Sure. So for PhDs, I'll talk about psychology, but first let me talk about all PhDs.
Yeah.
So um, the PhD programs at LSE, some of them are a little bit different to others. Because so in most cases, most LSE departments want you to have planned out your research before you come to LSE. So you have a really clear sense of what you want to do. And normally, what that means is we'd recommend that you speak to LSE academics about your ideas, because ultimately, right, they're the people who are going to be working with you on the PhD. And so it's good practice to contact them before applying and say, look, here's my idea. What do you think? Is this something you'd like to work on, right? Because you're going to be spending maybe 3, 4, 5 years with this person. So it's important to make sure it's a good fit. And psychology is an example of a department that wants you to do that. They want you to do the research proposal, contact a potential supervisor before you apply. But then for anyone else, there are other departments where they actually want you to develop your research proposal once you start at LSE. So in your first year or first, second year, you develop the proposal. The two examples that jump to mind for this are economics and normally law is a funny one as well, economics and law, where actually they don't want you to contact them before you start because they want to read the application blind and then you work on the proposal in the first year or two. So again, it's annoying until you have to do your research. But yes, for psychology, please think about your research proposal and potentially contact some supervisor.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Daniela says, hi, thank you for the presentation. And I would like to know if LSE offers any other types of funding or scholarships instead of COLFUTURO.
Yeah, loads. So the nice thing is that so at LSE, if you're accepted, there is just one application form, and by completing the application form, you'll be considered for all scholarships. So every single pot of money that we have, you'll be considered for from just completing this one financial application after you have been accepted. So you can have a look online at everything we have, but in a sense, you don't need to worry about it because we'll automatically consider you for everything. And then, of course, outside of LSE, also have a look at Chevening if you haven't already. So Chevening is another great example of an amazing scholarship organisation like COLFUTURO that can potentially fund your master's degree. So I'll put that name in the chat in case anyone hasn't heard of it before. And we don't have time to go into it now, but Google Chevening, yeah, as well. And look, sorry, I've just, the further you go in your education, the more it's a hustle, right? And you follow the money, you apply for as many things as you can. So I would be encouraging everyone on this call, yes, to apply for COLFUTURO, also apply for LSE scholarships, also apply for Chevening, speak to your boss at work, see if they'll give you any money, right? Apply for as much as you can, because, you follow the money, right? And chase the money to fund all of this.
Yes, thank you. If I have 2 degrees, lawyer and economist, how should I send my grades?
Okay, so if you have multiple degrees, so that could be bachelor's, master's, even PhDs, we will look at everything, but your most recent qualification will be the most important. So whatever you finished most recently will probably be the thing that we focus on in the application. But as long as you've met our requirements through at least one of your degrees, so even if, right, if you did a degree 20 years ago and you did really, really, really badly in it, if then the second one was much better and you met our requirements, it doesn't matter so much about the first one. Okay, so you have to send everything. We'll look at everything, but as long as you've met the requirements somehow, you'll be absolutely fine. And normally it's the most recent degree that we care about the most.
Do academic recommendation letters require a validity date, or can they be from before the current year?
Good question. So how it works is you don't send us the letter. Okay. So we will get in touch with your referees and ask them for the reference directly. So even if you've got a really nice letter from an academic, you can't send it to us. We have to get it from them. So on the application, all you do for the references is you put in the name of the person and their email address, and then we contact them for the reference. So even if you've got a letter, that's great. Maybe send a quick message to the referee and say, oh, hey, just so you know, LSE might contact you. And look, they can still send us the same letter you already have, but it has to come from them so that it's valid.
Okay, thank you. Could you show us another time the presentation in the part of the selection process, admission process, please?
Yeah, so on the selection process stuff, we are still figuring out the program of events, but we will definitely host a session on admissions. It might be the COLFUTURO open house we do, or we might do something on top as well to give you more time. So the advice would be, as I said, make sure that you scan that QR code. I'll share it again on screen really quickly. Make sure you've scanned this, put in a name, put in an email address, and we will contact you for help. Oh, so you know when the events will be.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Nathan. We have a lot of questions for you, but I think that are questions that are very, very specifically. So
Hmm.
in this case, I tell to the people that do attendees to please write these questions to Nathan directly.
Yeah.
And I know that he could attend a one-to-one. So Nathan, thank you again for this amazing opportunity. We don't have any more time, but it's a pleasure as always to have you here in this space. And see you in October here in Bogota.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen, and thank you everyone for taking time out to be here. I really hope that I meet some of you in October, but if not, I'm sure we'll speak more in the days to come. And in a year's time, you will all be here in London at LSE. So thank you again for being here.
Bien, y a todas las personas que asistieron, muchas gracias también por su participación. Lamentamos no haber podido leer todas las preguntas, leímos un poco las más generales que fueran de utilidad para todas las personas, pero lastimosamente se nos agotó el tiempo y ya lo que nos queda pues es que ustedes puedan dirigir sus inquietudes a Nathan, en este caso directamente a través del QR que él les indicó en la presentación y él se encargará de resolver sus inquietudes. Como lo mencionó Nathan, vamos a tener una sesión de Open House aquí en Bogotá el 16 de octubre, entonces muy pronto también les estaremos enviando la información a sus correos electrónicos para que puedan asistir a este espacio y hablar con él de forma personal. Entonces, muchas gracias a todos y que tengan una feliz tarde. Hasta luego.